Hey everyone, so I'm finally making this video. I apologize for the delay in it. If you caught my Instagram post, I was delayed for my own, because of my own stupidity. I made one video initially where I just screen recorded the whole thing, start to finish. Hey, here's how I put it together. The video ended up being way too long. It was well over a half hour. And yes, sometimes I spend 30 minutes or more editing just one photo. But anyway, so I recorded the whole thing, did not like it, again, was way too long. So then I decided, hey, why don't I just make a video like what I'm gonna do now and just walk you through the Photoshop layers and, you know, less tedious, but still show you how I put an image together. I did all that. But when I decided to actually record it, I pulled up the Photoshop file and unfortunately I saved it as a JPEG, so none of the layers were saved. So kind of a long story. I'm trying to condense as much as possible. So we're giving this a third attempt, third try, third time's the charm. All right, so let's get into it. So I would assume, like most of you, you pull up your images into Lightroom. When I'm in Lightroom, I just do kind of my standard white balance adjustments. I do some adjustments with highlights and shadows, nothing too crazy, but I have highlighted here in purple the actual files that I end up using. Obviously do some lens correction too with compensating for barrel distortion, things like that. And then I have my images where I would light up different elements of the room just using the flash. So anyway, and then I load them all into Photoshop. So let's open up the actual file. Okay, so I'm gonna zoom in a bit here just so you can get an idea. It's gonna cut off a little bit from the top and the bottom just for the sake of the video. All right, so we have the actual Photoshop file here. To sum up, I'm gonna show you how I went from an image that started off like this to an image like this. And as I can see, I can already find a couple things that I missed in kind of my final edit. I gotta get rid of those. In fact, let's just take care of that right now. So the image I used as the base layer was one of the stills that I took where I was blocking the light with kind of that big black scrim. And then all I did was take the other one and stack them on top of each other and just change the top layer to darken. Basically, what that's doing is only allowing the pixels that are darker than the layer below it to pop through. And that's what we did here. Then I simply combined those images together and this layer, which I called my dark combo. So essentially what I made here is kind of that feel. You know, I kept using the word moody, dramatic. This is really what I want to go for in my final image, pretty close to. There's still some things I would tweak. I'd lift some shadows and light some things up just a little bit differently to really bring them out. But yeah, basically this is kind of the look I'm going for. So step number one was to blend in that layer where I added kind of that really nice gradient look across the tile in the fireplace. So then I just took one of the polygonal lasso tools, did a rough cut around the fireplace and hand blended this in to give a little bit more of a dramatic light fall off from right to left with the fireplace, really showing off a little bit more detail in that tile. Next up, I decided to blend in a little bit of the light that I did on this kind of that shelf area. Hand blended it in just a little bit, but I also used it, if you notice, to get a little bit softer light on the shelving itself and solidify the color tone a little bit more. So by cutting out a lot of the ambient light and just blending back in only the light that was coming from the flash, I'm able to solidify or not really have to deal with a lot of color casts on the shelves themselves. Next step, on top of that, I did something similar with the shelf area on the left. But as you can see here, I really brightened that area quite a bit. Now, this area is further away from the window than the other shelf areas, so there's no reason for it to be brighter than the one on the right. I just did a subtle blend of a little bit of light to, again, really bring out a little bit more of the detail and texture on the wall and the shelving. Next up, on top of that, this is kind of a little trick I do. I have this layer as a lightened layer, and this is where I blasted the front of the couch with a ton of light. What I did here was, for one, it gives me the information what the true color of the couch is, and two, again, bringing out that detail in the couch itself. Now, again, this does not go with, you know, the mood and the feel of what I was talking about before. Now, most of the main light source on the couch is coming from in front of it, not from the main window. Stick with me here. But what I really want to do was capture the true color tone of that couch. And again, added that through a layer via lighten mode. But then, as you can see, coming in close here, I'm dealing with the different color cast again. The light coming from the flash is a different color temperature than the light coming from the window. And the light coming from the window, even though I tried my best to correct for the color cast in Lightroom and did a white balance, it's still a little bit bluer than the light from the flash. So my next step on top of that was to correct for the color, get rid of the blue. Now, some people might say, well, what you could do is go in here, select the blues via a hue saturation layer and just sap all the blues. The problem I have with that technique is yes, it would get rid of the blues, but then it takes away pretty much most of the color from that area. So instead of it looking blue, now it just looks gray. And the couch itself is not gray. It's kind of a light grayish, gray beige color tone. So I don't want to get rid of the blue. I basically just want to recolor it. So I added another layer and change it to a color mode, sample the color of the couch itself, paint it over the blue areas to make it a solid color tone. Is it perfect? No. If you zoom in real close, you could probably still see a little bit of blue. But in the big scheme of things, it makes the color more solid and got rid of those blue color casts. Next step on top of that, I did the same thing with this couch. Now, the thing I liked about this shot was, again, it's still soft lighting. This time it is coming from the direction of the window, but in comparison to the ambient shot, it's the highlights and shadows, there's a little bit more contrast there. So what I did with this is just did a normal layer and just hand blended a little bit more of that contrast from the flash layer onto this, just again to add a little bit more drama and contrast. Next layer on top of this, as you probably saw in the previous video, I did something very, very similar to the chairs, just to add a few more specular highlights, in this case, to the top of the dark gray chairs. Barely noticeable, but as you can see, going on and off, just adds a little bit more depth and dimension to the couches than the ambient layer did. Next layer on top of that is I used this flash layer where I lit up the coffee table, again, standing from the direction of the window, still mimicking the natural window light. But in light of this, two things happen. One, again, I get a little bit more drama and contrast in the highlights and shadows, just solely relying on the flashlight. And two, it helps out with the color tone of that area as well. So as you can see, just purely based on the ambient layer, the table looks a little washed out. Yeah, the shadows look nice. The shadows are a little bit softer in the ambient layer than in my layer where I lit it. But one big thing you notice is that the highlights and shadows are a little bit more uniform, and the color of the table is a little bit more accurate as well. In the ambient layer, the table looks a little bit washed out. So what I did, just basically, again, took that lasso tool, marked around the top of the coffee table, and just hand blended that in on top of it. I also took a real soft brush and took care of the candlesticks and that vase and some of the flowers as well to add a little bit more of the shadow. All right, next up, taking care of the couch that had the different colors on it. As you can see right now, it looks weird. The lighting does not match the room. So what I did is I made a copy of that dark combo layer that had nothing but the ambient light, put it on top, and this time used a layer with the luminosity mode to bring back the natural highlights and shadows of the couch without introducing any of the color tone into that layer. So add that on top. Now the couch looks a little bit more natural with its lighting, with its highlights from the windows and the shadows from the natural light coming in. Next step on top of this, I had to deal with the TV, or the missing TV. Now, fortunately for me, kind of a side story, I think I even mentioned it on the video where I was actually shooting. I had shot this living room before. I had shot it specifically for the builder roughly about a week before the video that you saw, and I had shot this area almost from the same exact angle. The only difference was the camera in the previous shoot was a little bit higher, probably by maybe 6 to 8 inches, so it wasn't the exact height, but the angle was pretty much spot on. So I took that photo, which you can see here, And again, same exact area. The difference was this time I did have the lights on. Usually the home builder likes to have the lights on in their photos. And the camera was set a little bit higher. But the angle was pretty much the same. So I did a real rough cut around the TV area, took that over, copied and pasted over onto this layer, and tried my best to match the angles and the perspective, and just hand blended that in. Now, as you can see, if you zoom in here, because I had the lights on in the other shot, we're getting a little bit of that tungsten, that orange color cast that was coming from the lamps on the other photo. So I had to take care of that, combine this all in a layer, and then just quickly took care of those little painter's tape touch-up points. Added another layer on top of this, just made it a color layer, matched the color of the wall, and again took a soft brush and painted over the orange with the color tone of the wall, which in this case is kind of that gray. It's a very subtle, I think it's mostly gray. So that's pretty much it. On top of that, I combined it all into one layer, adjusted for the verticals, and yeah, that's pretty much it. Now, on top of this, I think a lot of photographers would do different things with this photo. They might make some adjustments with the brightness, the levels. Maybe they decide to blend in a little bit more of the exposure from the window. If you notice, a real stupid mistake I did in here. If you zoom into the kitchen, the reflection in the mirror shows you my photo bag and lighting equipment that I left in the shot. Now, I probably could walk you through how I would get rid of this. There's still some work that needs to be done, but that's pretty much an obvious thing most photographers would take care of. So there you have it. That's how I put together one photo. My plan is to make some more of these videos. Again, as I mentioned in the last video, this is not the end all be all. This is just how I put it together. And I've learned a lot of these different lighting and editing techniques from other photographers on YouTube. So this is just kind of my contribution to the community as well. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to give me a thumbs up. The cliche things to say, or make sure to subscribe. My goal is to make some more of these videos and hopefully make some more kind of behind the scenes walkthrough videos. So I appreciate you taking the time to watch, and we'll see you on the next one.